So immigration is a really polarizing issue right now, not only in my country, the United States, but also in the church. So on the one hand, politically, you might have what's called sentimentalism, theories like open borders or things that they're well-intentioned, but then they kind of mistake good intentions for virtue and have really to be considered logically and just practically in terms of like hard realities of law and justice and resources. But then on the other hand, and this is the side I want to address today, is the issue of having these high moral principles. But it seems like these principles can only be applied when the conditions are just so, right? Where the economy is totally stable, all of our affairs are in order, and then we can love our neighbor. Both of these ideas, they're untethered from the reality. They're untethered from the concrete. They're both non-incarnational. And true Christian witness is incarnational. It engages with real people, not just in theory. And that's what justice requires. The incarnation means that justice entered into injustice. It doesn't exist in a different sphere. It exists in the same sphere that we live in, whether our circumstances are ideal or not. Christ did not enter into an ideal circumstance. Justice is the minimum measure of charity, giving each person what they're due, honoring the rights of each person. Our task is to make sure that our laws actually reflect justice and not just order. We have the ability to challenge those laws if they don't serve the most vulnerable people among us. Before we dive in too far though, here's what I'm not saying, right? Here's what I'm not saying. I need you to listen real well to this. I'm not saying that the United States is responsible for every situation in other countries. And I'm not saying that we need to ignore our own economy or our own national security. I'm not saying sovereign borders don't matter. This is not a defense of violent criminals, and it's not a defense of more nefarious actors who we all know that plenty of people hate America, right? But I'm not defending that. And I want to emphasize here also that Pope Francis said this, Pope John Paul II said this, that every person has a right not to emigrate as well. Right to live in peace and dignity in their home country. Countries have a responsibility to secure those conditions so that a person is not forced out of their homeland in search of safety for their family. But then when people are forced to leave their circumstances, to flee violence, to flee persecution or poverty, do our laws treat them with dignity? Do they reflect the truth about the human person? That's what I want to focus on today. So let's look at what's actually happening on the ground in the United States right now. So a lot of people say that they are for pro-legal immigration. It's just the ones that come here illegally. The problem with this is that the current administration is taking away legal pathways. And if you are in support of taking away legal pathways, please stay tuned because I'm going to talk about you next. So outside the United States coming in, it's called the United States Refugee Admissions Program. Usually you would need a referral. You could get referred in by a non-governmental organization. January 20th, 2025, that program was entirely suspended. That's all refugee admissions and processing. That cuts a lot of legal options for immigrants. If you are here in the United States, then you can seek asylum. Seeking asylum is very similar to being a refugee. It's just kind of the process itself is different, where if you are seeking asylum in the States, you're an asylee. If you are approved outside the United States, everything is vetted outside the United States. You come as a refugee. Where if you come to the United States, you can submit your asylum application. You wait a certain time period. I think it's like 180 days of your asylum case processing. You can apply for a work permit. There's also TPS, temporary protected status, which would be kind of by country of overseas. So if you have active wartime conflict, if you have a famine, or it's generally unsafe for you to return to your home country, you could apply for temporary protected status, which is intended to be just for the duration that there's conflict in that country. You do have to get it reauthorized from time to time, but you can also apply for a work permit. There were several designations that were removed with this current administration. Afghanistan was one of those, and I worked primarily with Afghan immigrants. So it is not safe to be in Afghanistan right now, particularly if you're Hazara. If you worked with the United States government, it's not safe for you to be there. That was one legal option that was removed. Then also just today, of the time of recording, it was announced that work authorizations are no longer going to be automatically extended. So if you have a work permit acquired legally, then it means that the work has been done to vet you to make sure that you're here legally. Those work authorizations expire. In the beginning, it seems like you have to do them constantly, and then you get to the point where it's like a 5-year work permit. But when those expire, you have to reapply. It used to be that while you were waiting for the United States to process your application, which you got in on a timely manner, that you could continue working while they were approving it. You can imagine that if you have your work permit, you've been working here, you're here legally, you get your renewal application in to make sure you can continue working, and then the US government slows it down, you can't work anymore until it's approved. So you could lose out on anywhere from 1 to 4 months of work. In the average range, you still have a right, a natural right, to provide for your family, and because you have that responsibility to feed your family. So you can see that if you no longer have the ability to legally work in the United States despite having resided here legally, you can see how this is creating an issue just in the natural order of justice, where you can't provide for your family. If the goal is order in the bureaucracy, that's not what it looks like on that human level, right? What about the most vulnerable among us who have no place to go, who have no home? When we label every single person here as dangerous, we associate the violent offenders with this person whose visa lapsed and they're working on a renewal right now. The system can't really tell us who is threatening society and who genuinely needs protection, because the immigration law here is actually very hard and very convoluted, almost constantly doing renewals in those early stages. And if English is not your first language, it's really hard. A lot of times you can't find a lawyer, you can't afford a lawyer. We need to make sure that our laws and our application, our enforcement, can differentiate between a violent offender and a person who needs protection. When we label everyone based on their legal status alone, we cannot look at the details and what their legal options are. I just want to bring that perspective to you. So if you think, well, just come here the right way, consider that it's a little more difficult than you might have realized. But one thing too I would like to say is that when the government does these sweeping reforms on the federal level, but it should be assessed on the local level, how much they can take in, versus saying this broad sweeping generalization of the federal government making this on behalf of every community. We need to take that into consideration as well, of subsidiarity. So now some people will defend these changes. I've seen this explicitly from Catholics, the idea that you need to use the dominant body of Christians in order to recreate the Christian moral order that the Constitution had presupposed. And I've seen it for a very long time, starting back, I'd say 2015. That's not how Christianity works. In the Roman Empire, where Jesus came, where he chose to enter, was not the ideal circumstance, right? The Christians did not have any cultural power, and they still transformed this empire from within itself. It wasn't a clash, it was a growing up and breaking down organically, because Christianity touches and it transforms whatever it comes into contact with. That is the beauty of our faith. It was their Christian witness, their concern for the poor, their concern for the widow, their concern for the least among us, that built that moral order from the ground up. They didn't need it enforced. Only later did Constantine actually recognize that Christianity does build order. It is politically useful. When the state becomes entangled with the church, when historically when they've done that, it's not because the church imposed itself. It had essentially changed the culture. It's through incarnational witness that we transform the culture. It's from actually caring for people in the concrete that we show concern for people. It's not in our ideals that we need to create the perfect situation and then live out our Christianity It does not grow when you force it, because it does not honor human subjectivity. We today live in a post-Christian world, right? We're not a pre-Christian world, we're a post-Christian world. That means most people have some idea of Christianity. Most people know some Christians, but their idea of Christians is largely not positive. They don't see concern. And there's some aspects where they can't always recognize it, concern from the vulnerable. But a lot of times what they see is like this divorce of the principle from its application. And this is what I'm pushing back on, because I don't want people to think I don't think that they care about people. I know that's the case, that they do. And I'm not saying that, but I would like to challenge here is that the principle must always be applied in the concrete. You can't wait for the ideal circumstance. When there's something like immigration that is, I don't know, the care for the widow, the concern for the foreigner, it's just such a Christian hallmark. I'm happy to be an American. I don't think there's another place on earth I'd rather live. I am very grateful for the freedoms I have in America. I want those freedoms to be able to be offered to other people. I want them to truly be able to join in, to feel safe for the first time in their lives. The other thing is that the Constitution itself, it was designed to prevent domination by any one faction. It was only meant to keep those factions in check so that one of those would not become too dominant in the culture. It had, originally envisioned probably many factions. It does not want to erase disagreement, and it doesn't want to try to form morality. It assumes that the morality is formed already and then tries to control the disagreements. And we can see in the Federalist Papers, James Madison, it's letter number 10, or paper number 10. He says explicitly that the system does not try to erase factions, as it tries to control the effects of human selfishness through structure. These mechanisms that would prevent any faction becoming too powerful to prevent domination by the majority. I appreciate the idea to avoid dominance by any one group. The weakness, though, here is that it said there's no way to erase the factions except to erase liberty. So he says there are two methods, again, of removing the causes of factions. The one by destroying the liberty, which is essential to its existence, and the other by giving to every citizen the same opinions, the same passions, and the same interests. So basically, the second is not an option, and the first would be to destroy liberty. So they're saying, James Madison here is saying that the causes of faction are sown into man. We can only control them, right? We can only control the effect of the factions. So the critique from the Catholic perspective here is that there is a way of removing those factions that does not destroy liberty, and that is through education. And so it's on us to evangelize, but the faith is not just a set of propositions that you have to accept to be true. Pope John Paul II wrote, the first form of evangelization is Christian witness. And I'm going to read it because it's just one of my favorite. He says, people today put more trust in witnesses than in teachers, in experience than in teaching, and in life in action than in theories. The witness of a Christian life is the first and irreplaceable form of mission. Christ, whose mission we continue, is the witness par excellence and the model of all Christian witness. The evangelical witness, which the world finds most appealing, is that of concern for people, of charity toward the poor, the weak, and those who suffer. The complete generosity underlying this attitude and these actions stand in marked contrast to human selfishness. And then, yes, this is where everything leads to Christ, to the proclamation, right? That first and irreplaceable form is witness to truly live a Christian life. And as we can see in Libertas, the gospel and the prudential application of the gospel is not always see eye to eye with the Constitution in terms of controlling the cause of factions and how to eradicate them. I think that though we can use these Christian Catholic principles to learn what to do next, when you've lost your Christian nation, you can't bring it back through force. You have to do it the hard way. That first form of evangelization, not losing sight of the person in front of you. To deny that those principles can be applied in imperfect circumstances is to practically deny the incarnation. I'm thinking of the prophets here too, who always challenged the law when it did not fit Christian principles. We need compassion. We need to make sure our laws are compassionate. This is how the ancient Christian faith transformed the world, by witness.